All right, let's get to the college game where Kalen DeBoer entering his second season, replacing Nick Saban at Alabama. Crimson Tide did make the college football playoff, 9-4 record, loss to Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl. SEC Media Days will take place next week in Atlanta. The Crimson Tide will be featured on the third day, which is Wednesday. As you see some of the other conferences and its Media Days, the SEC's event will be held at the Omni Hotel in the College Football Hall of Fame. Well, let's bring in one half of the Cover 3 podcast with Bud Elliot and Tom Fornelli with questions for these head coaches as if you guys were going to be there. And, Bud, I'm going to give you first word only because I've already done a segment more recently with Tom. So, your question for Kalen DeBoer at Media Days, Bud, what would that be?
Kalen, what is one thing you would do differently if you could have a redo on year one getting Tuscaloosa? I think like so many things kind of went well for them, but also they had some blunders. They obviously the loss in late season to Oklahoma. Like, you know, did you stick with Jalen Milroe too long? We saw some comments from players talking about how like now the offseason program is tougher, and I think that's probably just bluster. Nobody comes in and is like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put in a soft offseason program to really set the tone in year one following up Nick Saban. But yeah, I would ask him, hey, what would you do differently if you could have a redo on year one? And I think, you know, it was a decent season, but not quite up to those Nick Saban standards.
Mine's not all that dissimilar. I would look Kalen dead in the eyes and I would say, is there a part of you that is happy Jalen Milroe's gone and has graduated and moved on? Because Jalen Milroe, very, very effective college quarterback, but he also was not a great fit for what Kalen DeBoer's offense has typically done. He's always had mobile quarterbacks, but he's had quarterbacks who are mobile kind of as a secondary trait behind their throwing ability as a passer and their throwing arm. And while Jalen Milroe had a very strong arm, it was not very accurate. And I do feel like at times Alabama's offense probably felt a little bit handcuffed last season. So I do believe, I don't think he would answer it honestly, but I do think there's a part of Kalen DeBoer that'd be like, yeah, I kind of am.
Okay, let's see if we have something a little bit different for Sark, talking about Steve Sarkisian, Bud, as Texas will go on Tuesday.
I'm going to ask him, Sark, Arch Manning really wasn't ready to replace an injured 7th-round pick in Quinn Ewers? Like, really? But now we're supposed to expect like he might be the best quarterback in college football. Like, what's the disconnect there? Like, do we need an extra offseason of maturing there in Austin? So I would ask him, like, hey, man, like, do you regret not putting Arch in? Because Ewers just kind of wasn't it down the stretch, and now we learn, you know, that he was hurt.
Yeah, but I'm dealing with the same exact question here. I'm Sark. How many times did you think about benching Quinn Ewers for Arch Manning last year? Because when you watched Quinn play, like he did get hurt halfway through the season, missed a few games. Arch came in to start, but then Ewers came back, and it was very clear that he was not 100% for the rest of the season. He was not really able to put much oomph into any of his throws. He couldn't really turn his entire torso because of the oblique injury he was dealing with. And also in the red zone, they were terrible because that arm strength that was lacking just wasn't there for him to put it in tight windows. So with Arch Manning, who probably wasn't as evolved in the offense as Quinn Ewers had been to that point, considering his experience, I do think you probably could have had a more dynamic offense with Manning at quarterback, as far as especially in the red zone when it comes to finishing drives, that rushing threat that he posed. So I do wonder, like, they did pretty good. They got to the semifinals of the college football playoff with Ewers, but maybe they could have gotten past Ohio State with Manning.
Odds makers have priced Texas as pretty good favorites, co-favorites to win the CFP at 6-1 with Georgia, who's also going Tuesday. Tom, I'm going to have you go first here. Kirby Smart, what is the question du jour?
I would want an answer from Kirby about how he feels the transfer portal has impacted his program. Because we've seen a lot of programs out there that have used the portal to kind of supplement or build their rosters entirely. And the way that they've gone about doing it a lot of the time is, let's go find one of Georgia's backups. Take them, offer them a nice payday to come here and play, which has impacted Georgia's ability to hoard guys on both the offensive and defensive lines, which we saw them do when they were winning the national titles a couple years ago. They had guys, you know, they would rotate NFL defensive linemen after NFL defensive linemen in and out of the game throughout 4 quarters, which kept them fresh all game and all season long. But last 2 years, really, you haven't seen the same kind of production from their defensive players, because I wonder, just the lack of depth from being rated a bit in the portal, is it hurting them?
All right, Tom, sticking with the theme of the questions that Kirby probably won't answer, mine is very similar. So for 3 coaches in a row, I would ask my Kirby, like, your portal work has not really been up to snuff in comparison to what you guys do in high school. This year, you did a really nice job at the portal, at least per our rankings at 24/7 Sports. What was different? Like, have you put different focus on it, different energy? Do you have different people assigned to it? Maybe a shift of resources? And why do you think you were behind potentially in the portal? Because like their hit rate in the portal isn't near what it should be compared to like just their hit rate at a high school is otherworldly, which is why they won national titles under Kirby Smart. But yeah, I am interested in the evolution of Georgia's portal process.
By the way, Bud, when Kirby doesn't want to answer something, does he just go silent? Does he go, or we're like, well, what does it mean when Kirby doesn't want to answer questions? Because you sounded like
I think he just appeals to the legislature, right? Like they did get the whole thing passed where you like you couldn't Freedom of Information Act anybody. It's like I don't know, gavel.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Hopefully he answers a little more, at least the ones that we have put together here. Tom, what do we think about Brian Kelly at LSU?
Oh, we think a lot of things about Brian Kelly, but the one question I would want to ask him is, do you still think it's easier to win a national title at LSU than Notre Dame? Because that's what you said when you left Notre Dame for Baton Rouge, but here we are. You're entering year 3 with the tie, or year 4, and, you know, you're kind of on the hot seat going into the season where it feels like if you don't have a very solid year and get to the college football playoff and compete for an SEC title, they might be making a change in the Bayou. Meanwhile, Notre Dame reached the title game last year without you, and Notre Dame is looked at as one of the favorites to get back to the playoff again this year. So does it still feel easier?
That's a pretty good one, Tom. I was going to ask him, like, hey, coming off Jaden Daniels and 2 assumedly awesome years of Garrett Nussmeier, what the heck are you guys going to do at quarterback recruiting? Because last year didn't get anybody. The year before didn't get anybody good. The year before, guys already transferred out, and he wasn't good. Are you guys ever going to successfully sign and develop a high school quarterback at LSU? I mean, you have a lot of ammo to play with, given that you just produced Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier. But like in this year, they lost Bo Bentley to Oklahoma, and I don't really think they have a real legitimate backup plan as far as top level guys go. So I'm kind of like, I don't know, but there is a really good 27 who plays in Baton Rouge. I saw him recently in the Future 50 for 24/7 Sports, so stay tuned on that one. Right now it's kind of Florida and Michigan, but I've kind of got an inkling that maybe LSU isn't really cool with the number 1 quarterback in the country leaving Baton Rouge after they just went 0 for 3 in the last 3 years under Kelly in quarterback recruiting.
LSU on Monday, Ole Miss on Monday as well, Tom. And you look, I don't follow Lane Kiffin on X or Twitter, but I know that he did quote tweet the recently married Josh Pate. That would be the question I would ask him. What prompted that tweet? But what question would you have for the Lane trade?
I would ask him how much of a missed opportunity he feels like last season was, because this was an Ole Miss team that was on the precipice of reaching the college football playoff, and they had, they went all in. They had an NFL quarterback in Jackson Dart back for his 3rd season as a starter. They had a bunch of transfers on the defensive side of the ball to fix that, including Walter Nolan, who ended up being a 1st-round pick. And you had a 3-point overtime loss on the road to LSU. You had the touchdown loss on the road to Florida, and then you had the real heartbreaker, the 3-point loss at home to one of the worst Kentucky teams we've seen in the last decade. So how much of a missed opportunity does it feel like, and do you think you're going to be able to get back to that level anytime soon?
All right, Tom, I think mine is actually somewhat different enough this time. Mine was, how much does the loss to Florida keep you up at night? And if you had won that game, do you think you would actually be sleeping in Gainesville this time this year? Because last year, I mean, if they beat Florida, they go to the college ball playoff. He grew up as a guy, like a lot of people thought he probably wanted that Florida job. He could say Ole Miss is a better job than Florida, but I don't think most people would agree with that given the resources. Not that I love Gainesville, but I'd probably rather live in Gainesville than Oxford, all things considered. A little bit better access to talent down here where we live. So, yeah, how much does that Florida loss keep you up at night? And do you ever feel like you'll have another opportunity like that?
All right, guys, I'll get you out of here on this, and maybe you'll help out some editors at SEC Media Days. Under the radar storyline, Bud, take us through this thing.
Injury status of DJ Lagway. Like, I want to hear something good. We were just on in the 3 o'clock hour doing that segment of SEC dark horses. I do think if you get 12 games of healthy Lagway, I think Florida is a team that could get to Atlanta. If you don't, I also think Florida's a team that could have a coaching search by Halloween. I think that kid is that good, but he has to be healthy. He was shut down for spring, obviously, with the shoulder injury. They've said they expect him to be good. I would like a little update on that.
I just think that the title race in the conference is very wide open because there were 9 teams in the league that had winning records in conference play last year. Only 3 of them have returning starters at quarterback, which leads to a lot more questions than we typically see going into the season in the SEC. I don't know who the real true favorites are right now.
It'll be interesting. I've done a handful of season predictions. A lot of 9-4s will not make the CFP.
You're watching HQ Spotlight on CBS Sports Network. Our Cover 3 guys went through on the pod and gave their SEC dark horse picks. I can't help but notice that Danny Cannell did not give a dark horse pick for the SEC. I'll have to ask him about that later. Tom Fornelli going with South Carolina. We got Lenora Sellers, Dylan Stewart. They are back. Chip, we just previewed Auburn, and ultimately his prediction was 9-3, missing the CFP, but still sees them as a potential dark horse to win the SEC or be SEC champions. And how about Bud Elliot?
How could you?
What did you say again, Mike?
I have 4 words for you. Gator football.
There we go, baby. DJ Lagway, Billy Napier, going to take us to the promised land. I went to Florida, by the way, if you didn't know that at home. All right, let's welcome in the guys, Tom Fornelli, Chip Paterson, and Bud Elliot to discuss these dark horse picks. And we're going to start with South Carolina. Shout out to Shane Beamer and the culture that he's building there, because there are reports out there that Lenora Sellers and Dylan Stewart reportedly turned down these multi-million-dollar NIL offers to stay there with the Gamecocks. So ultimately, Tom, why was South Carolina your dark horse pick?
Because one of the things you just mentioned there is Lenora Sellers. If you look at the SEC last season, there were 9 teams that finished the year with a record in conference play of 5-3 or better. Only 3 of them have quarterbacks coming back as returning starters this year. Lenora Sellers is one of them. Garrett Nussmeier at LSU and Marcel Reed at Texas A&M are the other 2. Everybody else has a new starter, which means there are a lot of questions that will still need to be answered about a lot of these top teams that we look at as favorites. And if you look at the South Carolina team last year, they won 9 games in the regular season. They were on the bubble just outside of that college football playoff picture. They have Sellers coming back in his second season as starter, which we often see quarterbacks going into that second year receive a bit of a bump and improve, and they still have Dylan Stewart on defense. Now, there are also a lot of key players on the defensive side of the ball and on offense that they have to replace, which is why they are not considered a favorite. But I just look at the way this thing breaks down. If Sellers takes that step forward, if Dylan Stewart continues to be one of the better defensive players in the country, this is a team that I think is being just overlooked a little bit when you look at that schedule and you look at the talent that they have. I do not think it's entirely out of line that these Gamecocks could be competing for a trip to Atlanta at the end of the year.
Tom, I agree with you. They could. They wouldn't be my pick, though, because of what you mentioned. The losses on defense, I think, mean a lot. For some of these teams that recruit at that super elite level, I don't really care if you lose a lot of sixth rounder, 7th rounder, undrafted free agent types. But South Carolina doesn't recruit at that super elite level. They're merely good. And for them, if you lose 6 pretty high quality UDFAs in addition to what they have, 5 or 6 draft picks alone on the defensive side of the football, that defense carried them last year quite a bit. I think it's going to be a bit of a struggle this year. And offensively, I don't know that I love the pass catchers they brought in to give to Lenora Sellers. Last year, receiver was an issue. Josh Simon was their leading pass catcher. He was a tight end. He's gone. Maybe Nick Harbor steps up finally, or maybe he goes and runs in the Olympics. I don't know, but probably equal chance there that he actually works out. So I think South Carolina certainly could do this. Sellers is a stud, but man, for South Carolina, losing that many good players on defense, that scares me a little bit.
Yeah, picking up the baton right there. That is the thing that stands out to me, is that last year, Lenora Sellers had to be Superman. There's a reason why we were talking about him with Cam Newton-type performances, because he was just making it happen. There is not an overwhelming amount of talent that was there last year. And as Bud mentioned, you don't exactly look at the depth chart and start to see names that are going to scare you as a defense. And so the bet on South Carolina is a bet on Lenora Sellers. It is a bet on him continuing his development and taking that role, because we have seen quarterbacks, even in the Southeastern Conference, be able to elevate everyone around them to where, the team on the paper does not intimidate you, but that quarterback does. And I think Lenora Sellers does have that as his ceiling. The closer he gets to the ceiling is the closer South Carolina gets to winning an SEC title.
All right, let's talk about Auburn. We already talked about them, Chip, a little bit earlier, trying to get back in the winning season column. Ultimately, your prediction was 9-3, missing the CFP, and we know about all the red zone woes. We broke it all down. So, Chip, I want to know what, I guess, is the difference maker here to where they could then win the SEC championship?
Right, that's because if they're a dark horse pick, I like the value and I see the ceiling. You put my feet to the fire, call it game by game, I do end up spitting out a 9-3 record. That ain't exactly going to get him to the title game. But to expand on that is to say, instead of just taking care of business against, the Kentuckys and the Vanderbilts, the Arkansas, those manageable games, well, what if they do get up and they go and they pick off one of the best teams on their schedule? Talk about an Alabama, talking about a Georgia, talking about a Texas A&M, because if they are able to get good replacements on the defensive side of the ball so that Keldrick Falk does have a good complement inside on the interior defensive line, if the linebackers end up stepping up and give that defense a stout floor, well, then I think that one of the best wide receiver rooms in the Southeastern Conference and a resurgent Jackson Arnold can give Auburn a much, much better chance to be able to really compete with the best teams in the conference than what their current odds suggest.
I don't see it at all when it comes to these Auburn Tigers. Like, Chip, you've got them going 9-3. I saw Bud's prediction. He has them going 8-4. I've got Auburn going 6-6. I just don't know how much has really changed with this team from the 5-7 squad we saw last year to think that they are going to take a tremendous leap forward. I like Jackson Arnold. I felt like he was thrown under the bus a little bit at Oklahoma and shouldered a lot of blame that really wasn't his for things that went wrong there. But I do not think Jackson Arnold alone coming in to take over for Peyton Thorne, who, as much as I kind of thought he was just, an average quarterback, did perform pretty well in this offense last year. But I just don't see enough on either side of the ball in this one. And I think when you look at the pressure that Hugh Freeze is under and you look at that early schedule, starting on the road against Baylor, then a couple easy non-con games, but then very difficult road games in SEC play to start against Oklahoma and Texas A&M. I see a situation where if they do not get off to a very fast start, there's going to be, Hugh Freeze might be out of a job by the time that Georgia game rolls around. We could see another coup for Auburn and yet another coaching search underway. So I just don't see a very good season coming for this program.
You know what, guys, prior to last season, we were talking about Billy Napier and all the pressure that he was going to be under to perform at Florida. The schedule was tough last season. Somehow they squeaked out 8 wins. They win the final 4 games of the season after starting 4-5. And the schedule this year, but it's really not that much better. It is very, very difficult. But why are you finding some value in DJ Lagway and the Florida Gators here to be a potential dark horse when it comes to being SEC champs?
You said it. It is DJ Lagway. I think he's a guy who has the potential to eventually be like a number 1 overall pick. He's a very Ben Roethlisberger type of quarterback. You look at the build, he just throws guys off, and the arm is insane. I like what Florida has, I think, along both lines of scrimmage. Maybe a little bit of questions about what they have defensive depth-wise. But if you look at it, they kind of made that little quiet midseason change after they gave up like half 100 to Miami and Texas A&M to start the year last year. And they're like, oh, hey, let's actually just play a more sensible, a little more conservative type of defense. And in the final 2 months of the year, Florida played pretty darn good defense. They also have former 5-star cornerback Cormani McClain, who's coming along. He might even start for them. I like some of their young receivers. Dallas Wilson is certainly a name to know. Trey is obviously back. Hopefully he plays a little bit better, a little healthier this season. I'm not saying Florida's going to win the SEC, but I think they do have the upside ceiling where if everything clicks, certainly they could. Or if Lagway, who didn't even throw this spring coming off the arm injury, like if he's not healthy, then Napier's fired. We were talking about head coaching search and a Halloween.
Yeah, I'm not going with total coaching search by Halloween, but I do think it's going to be like just a win or 2 less than that. The schedule's just so tough. I really have a high regard and a lot of excitement about a lot of the teams that are on that Florida schedule. And yeah, DJ Lagway, if we had him on a pitch count during spring practice, it is going to be a concern moving forward.
Y'all just better pray that the Gators are not amazing, because I don't know if you can handle me getting a Gators national championship, back-to-back Stanley Cup champs in the Panthers, and then if Florida football is elite, I'm going to be the most insufferable person on the planet. Chip, Bud.
Thankfully, you don't have to worry about that.
Whoa, let's rein it in, guys. Come on. All right, the conversation continues on the Cover 3 podcast with Chip, Bud, Tom, Danny Cannell. You can watch right now by scanning that QR code on your screen.